I want to thank you for joining me for this Saturday session of Paint a Beautiful Picture. Today's format is going to be a little bit different, and I think in a few moments you will understand why. I have no guest speakers today. It's only going to be me. I'm going to tell you about an extraordinarily significant event in my life, and I believe that it will help you, my viewer, or you as a parent, to understand some things. In 2006, I had an extraordinarily simple surgery. They took out my gallbladder and they did it with the laparoscope. So literally, I was in and out of that hospital in less than 4 hours. It was simple and I did great. I mean, I was out walking around that evening feeling wonderful. 6 days later, I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, stood straight up onto my feet, and screamed hysterically, and I could not stop. I have really been in a lot of pain in my life. I have never been in pain like that. My son came up the stairs and put me into the car, and I was literally like this, laying back in the seat. I could not hardly even sit, and still screaming in the car. Thank God we were a mile and a half away from the nearest hospital. He took me there somehow. They thought I was having a baby. They brought a wheelchair. I couldn't sit in the wheelchair. I'm not joking. I stood up. I said, I cannot sit down. And for the next 8 hours, I screamed. I had well over 250 milligrams of IV Demerol. That's about enough to knock down an elephant. If you've been with me ever before, you know that I am an RN, so I know what I'm talking about. And I was a mere, 160-pound woman, and it did not even touch me. I'm still screaming frantically. My doctor was on vacation, so they called another gastroenterologist who told them to do this specific ultrasound with contrast, and he would be at the hospital in 10 minutes. And of course, he could hear me screaming in the background because pretty much everyone for the first 3 floors of the hospital could hear me scream. They took me for this ultrasound, and because my doctor was going on vacation and it was his last case of the day, he neglected to close off my bile duct. So bile was spewed all over my abdomen for 6 days. And because I have a very high pain threshold, I did not feel it until it was out of control. So I had gangrene, peritonitis, and septicemia where my blood itself was poisoned. Before it was over with, I ended up with pneumonia in all of my lobes. I was not expected to live. My family was told this and they came and said goodbye to me. Because I was so severely compromised in every single part of my body, I was on 16 liters of oxygen by rebreather, trying to get some oxygen into my bloodstream, but it really wasn't working. And so much of the time, my oxygen saturation levels were between about 81 and 84%, enough to cause severe brain damage. And this continued for 6 days. I left the hospital and my doctor wasn't thrilled, but they weren't doing anything for me, and nobody was going to be able to do anything for me. And so I went home. I got worse. I could not speak coherently much of the time. So much of what I knew before was gone. I had severe brain damage. I would call things by incorrect names. I would put food that I thought I had put into the refrigerator into the oven, and then there would be blood and nasty rotten food, and just there were a lot of implications about what happened to me. My former spouse really did not handle it very well. He told me that it was really impossible being married to me being brain dead, which I can appreciate that it was really very difficult. It was difficult for me too. I actually have scars across my face and various places where I would just beat my head against the desk and beat my head against the wall and beat my head against the door. I mean, till I was bloody and cracked my skin open. It was so incredibly frustrating. Now, I'm actually going to explain some of this to you, and I have a reason for doing that. Some of you have parents who have dementia, Alzheimer's, or other kinds of mental difficulties that you don't understand anything about. Some of you have children who have Asperger's or autism, and you can't really understand anything about that. Neither one of those groups of people are in a position to explain it to you. They're incapable of doing so. Because I went through this horrible time, and I'm going to tell you right now that it began on August 5th of 2006, and it continued until April the 16th of 2013. That is 7 years of my life. And then I was pretty miraculously healed of this brain damage. I just want you to understand some of what it's like experientially. Perhaps it will help you to be a more compassionate or a better child or caregiver of your parents, or a better parent and caregiver of your child. Maybe even it's about one of your siblings or a friend of yours that you just don't understand what they're going through. And this might give you a broader vision and help you somewhat. First of all, I can tell you it is frustrating beyond all description. I was well aware things did not work the same as they used to work, and I was incapable of doing anything about that. I did develop my speech further, and I went back to reading and developed my reading and vocabulary further. I played video games to try to help certain parts of my brain function connect or redevelop. I looked at some things online and learned that certain kinds of games will help you with parts of brain damage or brain implications, brain injury, lots of those sorts of things. So I started playing those kind of video games. Uh, but it was frustrating beyond all description. So, in early Alzheimer's or early Parkinsonian dementia, even some kinds of early onset, just simple nondescript dementia, people know something's wrong. They know that they're not processing things mentally in the same way, as clearly, as quickly, and it is extraordinarily frustrating. Well, so my question for you is, how do you act when you're frustrated? Because most people don't act at their best when they're frustrated. And especially when it is way beyond your control and you have no control, it's almost like your body or your mind itself is betraying you. That's a really bad feeling. I want you to know that. You see that frustration. You see people behave in certain ways. They withdraw, they're so frustrated, or they break things, they're so frustrated. They yell and scream, or they cuss, and you've never even heard this kind of stuff before out of your parent. Yeah, they're frustrated. They're frustrated beyond all description, and they don't know how to tell you about it. They don't want to admit to you that their mind is slipping. They don't want to admit to you all the things they can't remember. Occasionally, they'll make stuff up just to try to cover what they don't remember. And you're like, yeah, I've been hearing this story my whole life, and that's not the way it goes. That's not helping anybody. They're doing the best they can, okay? The best thing you can do for anyone who is experiencing a great amount of frustration is to show kindness, patience, and grace. And none of those are easy because you're experiencing your own frustration. I want to acknowledge that to you, okay? But do the very best that you can at giving them all the patience, all the kindness, and all the grace that you have. So, I was extremely frustrated. I was angry. I really was. I was angry that this doc was such an idiot. I was angry that my former husband wasn't handling it well or showing me kindness. I was angry that my own mind had betrayed me. I was angry that no one would listen to me because I went to various doctors and I had various parts of my mental status tested and I did a lot of things. I was really trying to get someone to help me. I was very angry. You may deal with that with your parent, and you will definitely deal with that with your child. If you have an autistic child, a child with Asperger's, a child with a brain injury, you're going to deal with some anger. And the best thing you can possibly do is stay calm. Easier said than done. I acknowledge that to you right off the bat. But they need you to be calm because nothing in their world is calm. They are agitated and upset, frustrated, angry. Oh, yeah, they need your calm because they don't have much of their own. I was also really sad. I was sad that I did not appreciate before the mind that I had. And I was even sadder that I had lost it. How I lost it wasn't it. It was that I had lost it. I want to tell you that people who have a compromised mental status, they are sad. They may not be able to say that to you, but they are. Kids with autism are often sad that they can't make friends or they can't have a regular relationship like everyone else. Many kids with Asperger's are really sad that they cannot socialize normally. And I can tell you that people with autism, uh, they feel a lot of sadness that they can't fix it. They want to fix it, but nobody can. Certainly, people with Alzheimer's and people with Parkinsonian dementia or other non-specified dementias, they feel a lot of sadness. They will often become almost terminally depressed. No matter how much medication you give them, they can't get past it. I had to work through all of those parts of the grief process over what happened with my brain damage. And in addition to that, I had to deal with the frustration and the sadness and, frankly, the anger of family members, not just my husband, but siblings and friends who didn't know what to do with me anymore because I was not the same person. So I lost a lot of relationships along the way. People just could not handle it how I was. Oh, and of course, it changed me socially. Many times, people who have strokes, they don't want to have family around them anymore. They don't want to go places. They're very socially awkward. Even the friendliest, most outgoing person, suddenly they don't want to cope with having company over, and they just don't behave the same socially. That assuredly happened to me. I've been around the globe doing relief work and helping people and worked with tens of thousands of people as a nurse. And suddenly, I couldn't even hardly go to the grocery store. Like, it freaked me out so much. I couldn't do it. I've gone to church my entire life. I could barely stand going to church. I would literally, as I got farther along, a couple years later into my brain damage after my husband and I were separated and he didn't really want to deal with me anymore, um, I would go to church after it started, sit in the very back, and before it was over, leave. So I didn't have to deal with anybody except maybe the person at the very back who handed me a bulletin. I couldn't stand it. I didn't go to the grocery store. One time I didn't go to the grocery store for well over 3.5 months. I could not handle it. I could not do it. So I'm talking major personality changes, and it does often happen. Sometimes someone who's been really happy-go-lucky and real cheerful and really pleasant to be around, they get to be this old cranky person, and you're like, what happened here? But I'm telling you that as certain kinds of changes happen inside of your mind, personality changes can also occur. You have to have that in your understanding with your elderly parents or someone that you know that is going through really severe changes as they're starting to deal with dementia. Not so much in autism or Asperger's, but there are some kids who do have certain personality disorders tied to that. And you need to have a good health professional and actually a really good psychologist or psychiatrist that's also able to work with you with your children if you have this to handle. Okay, so the next thing that happened to me was that I ended up separated from my former husband, and I've been on my own now for well over almost 14 years. And I had to deal with the loss, and it was really difficult. So I dealt with the loss of my own mind. I dealt with the loss of the person that I knew myself as. I would literally stand in the mirror and say out loud, I don't know you. I'm pretty sure I don't like you. I don't know how to live with you. And I wish you would just leave me alone and walk away. I mean, it just bothered me so much who this person was, and I was not familiar with this person. I was not familiar with this life, and I was not happy with it. I'm just telling you some of the things that people process or go through, and it's not an abnormal thing. And you're on the sidelines trying to figure this all out, and you think you know this person, and suddenly all the rules of engagement have changed. You're not quite sure what to do with that. That's why I'm trying to give you this information and see if I can't help you. So I lost a lot of my relationships. I lost my home. I lost my past because I was the family historian. I can tell you when just about everybody was born and tons of details about their life, but I couldn't tell you anything anymore. It was terrible. It was very scary. And oh my goodness, I lost my future because suddenly I'm on my own in a strange place, living a life I never expected to live. Lots of my friends are gone. Even some of my family won't have anything to do with me anymore. The future looked nothing like I had maybe once imagined that it was going to be. I promise you that people who have Alzheimer's and Parkinsonian dementia or nonspecific dementia, they are losing their past and their future, and it is very scary. You need to be very kind to them. I'm going to give you a specific piece of information that I hope will be helpful to some of you, or maybe a whole lot of you who are listening to me. You're dealing with someone, especially with dementia, and they're telling you a story, and it isn't like you remember. They're filling in the blanks the best they can because they don't want to look stupid. They're still at least not so far down the road that they're aware that something's not right, and they're trying to compensate. The worst thing you could ever do is argue with them. That's not what happened. You're so confused. You've told me this story 100 times. That's not what you told me before. All you're doing is making them feel worse and worse and worse. I will say this a number of times to you, but today I hope you really understand this. What the mind cannot remember, the heart will not forget. If your mom doesn't remember you anymore, if your dad doesn't remember significant parts of your life and you'd like to talk to him about them, but he is incapable of doing that, you can push, you can argue, you can straighten him out, you can correct him, you can everything. And their heart will remember that you just want to argue and you just want to prove them wrong and you want to make them look stupid. Or you can respectfully listen and you can say to them, I'm glad you can still remember some things, Mom. I'm glad you still have good memories, Dad. And you can help their heart know that you love them, that they are so important to you. And the bottom line for you is not about being right and not having an argument, but about showing acceptance and kindness to them. What the mind cannot remember, the heart will not forget. I had a lot of really negative responses from a lot of people. And even now, with my mind back, my heart does not forget the way they treated me and the way they acted to me. It's the truth. All right, so I lost everything basically. I really truly felt that way. I used to tell God, you know what? You already took my past, my future, my physical health, certainly my mind, my home, my friends, some of my family. I mean, come on. Why don't you just kill me? It'd be a whole lot easier. I mean, in fact, I begged God repeatedly, please just let me die, because this life, I don't think this life is worth living. You know, I kept that up for 4 years. 4 years. 4 years. It was horrible. I just want you to know that. I feel so much compassion for people who have brain injury or disease state that really makes them wish they'd rather be dead than alive, because I understand. And I'm going to talk to you a minute about this. The reason I did not kill myself had nothing to do with God. God wasn't going to give up on me if I committed suicide. It was about my children and my grandchildren. I did not have one intention of leaving them with the legacy that when things got very bad, Mama, Granny, couldn't make it, so she took her own life. It was never going to be the last thing that my sons or my grandsons were going to say about me. And so I kept breathing. I also kept myself occupied to the best of my ability. In my lifetime, I have crocheted and cross-stitched and quilted, and I kept doing what I was able to do at that time. Interestingly, some of the work I did was more creative than work I've done at other periods. So sometimes people who have brain damage or certain kinds of illnesses, they can continue to do things, and maybe some things even better, or certainly with a more creative bent, and you need to allow them that freedom. It doesn't have to look like something amazing to you. That's perfectly acceptable. But you need to let them continue to pursue what they have to pursue and what they desire to pursue. If they paint, let them paint. If they sew, let them sew. If it's not perfect and they are experiencing frustration, then help them. But allow them to do something so they have an outlet of some of all that emotion. In October of 2010, and I think I will always remember this day, I was sitting in my chair rocking, knitting a piece for my one son, And I finally just got this epiphany, I guess we'll say. And I stopped the rocker. I put my hands up in the air like this and I said, okay, I'll tell you what. If I can serve you better like this, God, without my mind in this compromised state as I see it, than I can with it, then I accept these terms. Don't give me back my mind. I was really serious too. You better believe that was one of the hardest things, if not the most difficult thing I ever did in my life, was come to that place where I accepted that maybe this was going to be my life. Maybe I really was going to live the rest of my existence on this earth compromised or brain damaged. That was a really big day for me. And it altered a lot of things. I stopped the fight. I wasn't nearly as frustrated. I know my blood pressure came down and a lot of other things, and I started having so much less difficulty with my health because of it. It was awesome. It really was. So at least the next couple of years were a lot more peaceful after I came to that acceptance place. But I want you to know those 4.5 years where I had not yet accepted it, those were tough years. That was a wrestling match every day of my life. And people go, well, you shouldn't be angry with God and you shouldn't fight with God. And you know that's not a good idea. This is what I say. Jacob wrestled with God. God didn't have any problems with that. And Jacob told him in no uncertain terms, I will not let go of you until you bless me. Jacob was not going to stop that wrestling match till he had had satisfaction. You know, you don't go into Walmart and wrestle a stranger, right? You only wrestle around with someone you know and someone you care about. In fact, it's the classic act of great physical love for teenage boys. They can't walk up and put their arms around each other and go, I love you. So they wrestle together. That's really what wrestling is. That wrestling with God in my spirit and my mind, there was absolutely nothing wrong with that. It was some of the best spiritual work I ever did in my lifetime. Okay. So when your parents really wrestling things out, don't say to them, oh, Dad, you don't really need to do that. It's not worth it. Don't be doing that to them. Don't shut them down. Acknowledge to them. I bet if this happened to me, I'd be wrestling this out in my mind too. I bet I'd be mad at God. I bet I'd have some things to fight through with him. Really, they don't need your judgment and your criticism. They need your support. They need your limited, as it may be, understanding. And they definitely need you to be kind. So acknowledge them right out loud. If this was me, I bet I'd be frustrated out of my mind too. I bet I'd be wrestling and fighting with God and mad. I bet I would, Dad. I can understand why you are. Mom, I bet if this ever happened to me, I would be sad. I'd be spending a lot of times crying. I'd be really frustrated. I'm really sorry you're going through this, but I am here with you in it, and I'm not going anywhere. Really, you can show support. One of the other things that was really challenging for me personally, and I'm going to describe this because I had a friend that's a psychological nurse, and she said to me, if you ever share this story with people, share this part because it's a big deal. I had no sense of permanence. Little kids love peekaboo because they don't. You go away when you cover up your face, and then you come back, and they're so surprised, and it's kind of funny. If I didn't see it, it did not exist. That wasn't true of people, but it was true of stuff. So everything in the entire kitchen was laid out on the counter because if I couldn't see it, I didn't have it. Much of the time I would have milk in the fridge, but I didn't know that I had milk in the fridge because I couldn't see it. So I'd eat dry cereal. It was very perplexing to me why that happened, and the implications of it were kind of wild because sometimes my son would come to my house and he'd open the cupboard and he'd say, Mom, did you know that you have 5 pounds of sugar in here? I'd say, no, I don't. He would take me by the hand. He'd bring me over there. He'd say, Mom, look at this. I'd go, wow, I wonder where that came from. See, I had no earthly idea. So if I looked on the counter and I didn't notice sugar, I'd go buy some more. But then I'd put it in the cupboard. I didn't know that I had any. I'd get some more. That's how it was with me. I share that with you specifically because there are idiosyncrasies of things in brain damage or even certain diseases that don't make any sense to anybody, including the person to whom it's happening. But it doesn't mean it's not happening, and it doesn't mean you don't need to be alongside of them and help them cope. So if you notice something like that, you go to your dad's house and everything is always all laid out across the counter. You're like, let me put this away. You might not be helping him. If he's still capable of cooking, making a peanut butter jelly sandwich or a grilled cheese sandwich, and he's not going to burn the house down, you need to let that happen and you need to leave things alone or at least ask, can you tell me why this is? And if they can't tell you, don't keep interfering. Don't try to make it better. Don't try to make it normal. They're doing what they can do. They're handling this the best way they possibly can. Support them in that. Now, if they never take a shower and they refuse to take their medications, those are different things. So if they've developed an aversion to water, then you've got to get them at least to wash off. Or I'm not joking, you might need to get into the shower with them. Awkward as all get out with an opposite sex parent, but get your wife to take your mother into the shower or get your husband to take your daddy into the shower. Go in there with them and let them know, I'm right here. You're going to be okay. Buy them a shower stool. Stand in there and, in your boxers if you got to and scrub them off and get them cleaned up. You need to do certain compensatory actions to help them with their in particular struggles. If they never want to go out anymore and they were really social in the past, you might ask them, do you want anyone to come over here to see you? If they say no, that's what they mean. I'm really sorry. This is difficult. I get this. But you need to be as respectful of them as you possibly can and what they are going through. I would get together with two of my older sisters a couple times a month, and we would play dominoes or we would play really simple card games because I couldn't play what I used to play. Not at all. And we would laugh and we would eat. And, it was a good thing for me. I tried to go to my sister's one time. She lived in the same place for 15 years. I knew where it was. I'd been there a bajillion times. I couldn't find it. I called her on the phone, frantic. I don't know where you are. I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get there. I need you to come and get me. This is where I am. This is the corner I'm at. About 3 times she tried to tell me where to go and how to get there. She really thought that was going to work. I just kept getting more and more frantic, and I really couldn't get there. So what should have been about a 15-minute drive, I drove around for an hour and a half. Finally, she got in her car and she came to get me. She was not terribly happy, and she kind of jumped on me about that, like, this is ridiculous, whatever all. It was the only time it ever happened when it was that bad. This is what you got to have in your head for real. They're doing the best they can. I'm going to repeat that for you. They are doing the best they can. They're not trying to make your life miserable. They're not trying to be frustrating. They're not just acting stupidly. This covers both little kids and older parents. That's not what's happening. They really are doing the best they can. And you need to remember that. Don't jump their case about something over which they have absolutely no control. It's not helping. Okay? So I had this problem that a lot of people who have brain damage or other diseases will have, and that is that I would tell the same story over and over and over, and I'm a pretty, excitable storyteller. So I would say to one of my sons, man, do you know what happened? Da, 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 da. And I'd get maybe 3, 4, 5 sentences into the story, and then, of course, the train derailed. I didn't remember the rest of the story. I'd start crying, sometimes sobbing. I felt so stupid. I knew I was stuck and I couldn't get unstuck and I couldn't keep going. It was terrible, terrible. And an hour later, guess what? I'm telling them the same story. Do you know what happened? And I started and I'm all excited, and God bless my sons, because I know that this was challenging for them. But you know what? They are the people who really hung tough with me. I mean, tough. They were amazing. They weren't perfect. Sometimes they'd get mad. Sometimes they'd be over it. Sometimes my son would roll his eyes like, Mom, you told me this. And I go, I did? Mom, I already know about this. You do? How do you know? My point being, if they're going to tell you the same story 20 times, as much as you can, and I know that not everyone is equally capable of this, just listen. It's interesting for them. They're doing what they can to share parts of their life with you. So just listen. I mean, really, what is this costing you? 10 more minutes? Don't worry, when they're gone, you're going to be sorry you didn't take those 10 minutes to listen. Just saying. All right, so I had a lot of challenges. Now, my friend said to me, "Can you describe what it was like?" And I can, and I'm going to. Then he had something really bad happen to him, and he's not willing to speak to you on camera, and I respect that. But I am going to share with you what he said. For me, it was all white space. In my lifetime, including much of the time now, I have an extraordinarily active mind, and there is just like constant color and constant motion in my head about all sorts of things. With my brain damage, it was just white, like a totally whited out blizzard kind of a day. Or blinding sunlight where you just can't even hardly see a single thing except light in your face. Yeah, it was white. And it was reasonably calm. It wasn't noisy. It wasn't confusing to me. My friend, on the other hand, said that there was a lot of noise and it was black. It was like a dark, dark pit. And there were elements of things that would come in that would be really disturbing, whether those were images or auditory messages from inside of this person's own mind. In other words, not everyone experiences the same kinds of things. That's what I want you to get. And your parent or your child, they may not be able to adequately describe to you what is happening, but I want you to know, especially in an older person who now is dealing with some kind of dementia, that is an altered state for them. It wasn't what they knew before, and it's definitely going to have some level of discomfort. I had discomfort because it was so bloom quiet in there. My friend had discomfort because it was so black and bleak and terrible messages would come, whether visually or auditorily. So you don't know everything about what they're experiencing, and to the best of your ability, ask them and try to understand what's going on with them. The other thing that happened to me was that as time went on, especially after I accepted it, I learned to enjoy my state. I really did. I learned to enjoy the peace and quiet of my personality and my mind. I didn't have to go. I didn't have to be with other people. I was very content with myself. Sometimes, but not always. People with dementia, people with certain kinds of diseases, even sometimes a young kid with autism, they will come to that acceptance point and they will be pretty content with how things are. And you might want to push them. Oh, but you need to go do things with your friends. Oh, but you always played bridge. Why don't you go? Oh, but you need to go play baseball because after all, that's what other kids your age are doing. And I think it'll really help you. It's age appropriate and socially good for you. You know, I'm not sure that that's right. I'm just telling you the truth, having lived through it. I think if they're really content, they've come to a place of acceptance, you need to deal with those terms. They're okay. Learn to be okay as an outsider, even as someone who loves them, with where they are now. Honestly and really, do your best to, if they can accept it and they're content with it, you accept it too. Be as content with it as you can. I had to go through quite a bit of change, and it was not a good experience. People with dementia, especially, but this is also true of children with autism or Asperger's or other kinds of disorders where everything isn't processed normally, don't like change. So you know what? Don't drag them to a new school every year trying to find a better one. Don't try to get them a new play group because they're not getting along with this other one, but they'll probably do better with this one. And then they don't do well with that one in a year and you get them a new one. They don't like change. They don't adjust well to change. Don't do that. Don't give your mom or dad a caregiver and then in 6 months go, yeah, I'm not really liking this. This is not working out. So I'm going to get you another one. And oh, you know, you're not doing a great job of keeping up your home. So I'm going to put you in another home. And then in 5 years from now, you're not going to do great in that home. I'm going to move you again. And this facility isn't perfect. So I'm going to move. They don't deal well with change and adjustment. Don't be pulling that junk on them. Do the very best you can to give them the most stable and consistent environment possible because it minimizes all the collateral damage that comes with mental compromise. Seriously, do for them the best you can to give them stability. It's a very big thing for people who are mentally compromised. And I can't say I would have gotten better sooner, but I probably wouldn't have gone through nearly the anguish that I went through without some of all that radical change going on with me, just so you know. All right, and so mine resolved, and it spontaneously resolved. It miraculously resolved. I was talking to my son on FaceTime one day. He was in Mississippi, I was in Michigan. He said, "Mom, did you notice anything?" I said, "Like what?" He said, "Well, you just told me a story, and you went linear instead of looping around, looping around, looping around, looping around, which a lot of people with brain damage or disorders, that's what they do. They loop. Like I said, tell the story, cry, an hour later, tell the story. That's looping." He said, "Mom, you went linear. You just told me a story from the beginning to the end." I said, "Okay." See, because I was not aware that I wasn't doing that before, and suddenly I was. He said, "Mom, did you notice that your vocabulary is starting to resume?" I said, "Not really." He said, "Okay, listen, we're going to talk every day," which we did talk every day. And in about 6 days flat, I got brain slammed. So you ever seen a quarterback and some guy comes out of nowhere and bam, that boy gets body slammed onto the turf, and he never saw that coming. Well, I got brain slammed. Suddenly, I was back. I'll never forget it. I told you, April 16th, that day it was really back. April 17th, I stood in the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and I said, "Man, am I glad to see you. Like, welcome back, baby. It is really good." And it is. And I am thankful beyond all description every single solitary day of my life to have my mind back. I will say this to you, interestingly enough. My mind is not the same as it was before. It's really, truly not the same before my brain damage as my new mind is now. There are definitely what I call Swiss cheese moments where there's a hole somewhere. I'll be going along and suddenly I just don't know. Where I used to be embarrassed to say I don't know, or I felt kind of compelled to fill in the blanks. Now I just look at someone and say, "I don't know that today." I'm very comfortable with that statement. I don't know that today. I might even know it in an hour, but right now, yeah, I just got a Swiss cheese hole right there. I don't know it. And I'm okay about that because none of us know everything. The other thing that's interesting is, though my personality has somewhat resumed, it's not like it was before. I'm not nearly as willing to, run out in a big crowd of people and just go on and on and on. I'm still a little, I wouldn't use the word apprehensive, but maybe cautious or careful. Just, I'm not exactly the same. I'll go to the store, but sometimes I don't really still love it. Mostly it's fine. I don't go to malls, though. I don't often go places where there are massive crowds. If I do, I need to be in the front where I'm not seeing this huge, gigantic crowd. That never was true before. So some of those personality things have stayed with me. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because if you have a child that as they grow, they develop and they improve socially in certain ways, they, definitely change and things get better. You need to be willing to make those adjustments alongside of them. It's not so easy. The transition is not that easy. And they might be very mindful of, once I was like this, and now I'm like this, and I'm trying to handle who I actually am and the differences in my own self and the way I'm approaching things. Yeah, that can be pretty challenging. I just want you to know that. And then you have the bonus, the added part of a kid who's going into puberty or becoming a young adult, and things are changing anyways. Most kids are awkward in that stage. And then they have this other issue that they're trying to handle or they're coping with. You need to be so gracious, so patient, very kind, and supportive. Stand alongside of them. I see some things have changed in you. How do you feel about that? They seem like good changes to me. How are you doing with that? How's that going? That's a very important conversation to have to help them process some of that. If it weren't for my son, and you've heard me say that my youngest son is my best friend on the planet, and I promise you that he is, he's a brilliant young man. And his mind and mine maybe don't work the same, but we have enough in common that as I kind of came back online, he really helped me process some of what had happened to me and some of what was happening when my mind came back and how some of my personality didn't return in just the same way and how I was coping with that and what that was going to look like. He was amazingly supportive, and I'm so appreciative. God bless you, Marcus, for your great love and kindness toward me. I know I gave you that as a child, but you were not obligated to give that back, and I appreciate it ever so much, my son. And I promise you, your mom or your dad and your child, they're going to feel exactly the same sense of deep gratitude and love toward you if you are supportive and encouragement throughout their journey. I promise you I'm right about this. So, you know what? I can honestly say to you, none of us know what's coming. I've seen people that were brilliant that got into a severe motorcycle accident and were radically altered and lived for over 40 years thereafter in that altered state. You have no idea what's going to happen to you. You could be in a car accident. There are just so many things. You could fall off a ladder. I have seen way too many scenarios as an RN of things that have happened to people that changed their lives in ways they never would have imagined possible. No one ever really plans on getting Alzheimer's. No one plans on having an autistic child. Really. And yet, it happens. Things happen to us. And so, what are you going to do? You can be angry. I was. You can be frustrated. I was. You can be sad. I was. You can learn to accept. I did. You can be content. I was. You can cope. I did. That's what I want you to hear today. This really is a message of hope. Is someone always going to be cured? No, I would never lie to you. It was very unlikely what happened to me. Really, really, really unlikely. And as I said, I'm awfully thankful. I ask God for people that I meet that are having real struggles, that if it's His plan, that He would heal them. Because I think that's an amazing testimony and a great life story. But it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes it just goes on and on and on. And you, as a human being, as a parent, as a child, or a friend, what are you going to do in response to that? What are you going to do for this person whom you say that you love, that you care so much about? Are you going to attempt to understand? Are you going to stand there with them, being supportive and encouragement and encouragement, even when it's really hard? Because, man, it's hard. My kids have both talked to me about how hard it was. This is the last part of this I want to talk to you about. I recently spent time with my grandsons. My one grandson was 6 years old when my brain damage happened. He knew me before. I asked him what that was like, because he was a little kid, but still he was very aware that his granny was not the same anymore. He said, "You know, Granny, the one thing I do know is your heart did not change. You would still hug and kiss me. You still wanted to spend time with me. Together we would go out into the backyard and roast marshmallows and make s'mores. You still went camping with our family sometimes, even as difficult as that was and how much you didn't like it. But I still knew your heart. You still loved me. That's what I know. Yes, you were a lot different." And he said what was funny to him was when my mind came back and we started playing games again, he was really astounded at how smart I am, because he said, "I guess I forgot that part." So when we played cards this week, even all of them, my grandsons and my son, remarked, "Wow, Mom, your brain is awfully sharp for a person your age." And it is. I acknowledge that. I have friends my exact same age who have started going through some normal changes. They'll forget things and things will happen to them. Yeah, because of this new brain, I haven't even had any of that difficulty whatsoever, I admit. And I'm thankful for that. For the 7 years I lost, maybe I'm going to get some bonus time. I don't know. But you know what? They knew about my heart. Now, my youngest grandson was only 2 years old when it happened. And he said, "Granny, honestly, I didn't remember you before. So you were the granny I knew. That was all I knew. He said, for me, it was very shocking when you were healed because I didn't really know that person. And your heart was the same, but your personality was not just the same. And certainly your mind was not the same. And it was very surprising for me. But he also echoed his older brother's sentiments. And he said, but your heart never changed at all, Granny. That isn't always the case. I want you to know that. As I said, sometimes people with Alzheimer's or certain kinds of dementia, they get nasty. They get grumpy. You've never seen them cuss. As my son said to me, Mom, I didn't even think you knew words like that. Sometimes that'll happen. And you might be really surprised, taken aback, feel awkward. And still, that person needs your love and your support. Considering this is a parenting video, I want to say to you, if this is your child has a brain injury, your child has a disease entity, we'll use that, or a behavioral problem, and you really don't know how to stand it and how to cope with it and how to be supportive and encouraging. What I want to say to you is there are a lot of people in the world who are living through something like what you are living through. You need to get a hold of those people. I don't care if you go to a support group or a counselor or a good pastor or even have a mentor who's going to hold your hand and get you through this, because we all need support. You need support while you're supporting your child. You need encouragement while you're encouraging your child. And you probably even need some direction while you're teaching your child and directing them through their life. So get it. Do not be ashamed. Do not be afraid. Be willing to get your own self some help in order that you might be the most effective, compassionate parent in the world to this child who has special needs. I hope when you hear me from this day forward that you have a deeper understanding of my level of commitment to helping you. Because you know what? I did not necessarily get a great deal of help when I was going through things. I'm thankful for the help I got, and I'm really thankful for where I am in my life today. I just want you to understand all of us need one another desperately. Your children, they need you far more than you might know. Your parents also, at some point in their lifetime, might need you much more than you ever knew. And so, in your own mind, in your own heart, start to develop an attitude. I don't know what's going to come. Something really unexpected might happen in my lifetime, to me or to a family member whom I love dearly. What am I going to do? How am I going to respond to that? What is my life going to actually look like if that occurs? And if you make up your mind and you determine in your heart that you're still going to be the exact same caring, supportive, encouraging person that you are now or that you are becoming, then you will do that. If you determine in your mind that you're going to get the help that you need because you don't know everything, but you're going to make it, you know what? You will. I just want you to know, if someone would have told me when I was a young person that I would have horrible brain damage and it would take my world apart, I don't think I would have handled it well, because I didn't handle it well when it happened. And my goal is always to equip you and prepare you, even for the most unexpected thing, in order that you are better equipped to be an astounding parent. And even an astounding person, for that matter. I'm so thankful for my life. I'm thankful for my friends, my family, my ability to think and speak. And I'm really thankful for you and the ability that I have to share my life with you, my heart, my thoughts, the things which I have learned. I hope it's of a lot of use to you, practical, useful information. And I also hope that in some small way it is encouraging and inspiring to you. I appreciate you so much. I'm really glad you were with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. Please send me your comments, your questions, or your suggestions. I would love to hear from you. And I will look forward to seeing you again soon on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.